get this thing done. All right, so we are back for part 3 of the Mage 101 series. We're going to talk about gearing a little bit. Things that you should be concerned about as a raiding mage are spell power, hit, and crit. In Classic, Intellect does not give you spell power. Just increases your mana pool and gives you a little bit of chance to crit. You're going to get a bunch of it incidentally, but it's never something you should gear for. Take away of that. You're also going to get some incidental stam and mana per 5 and random resist. Classic itemization joke, but it's not something you should be actively aiming for. So the first thing to be cognizant of is that spells in WoW or in Classic run on 2 different hit tables. You have a hit table to miss, which against a boss is 17% chance by default. You can offset that by some with the Precision talent in the Frost tree. And again, with gear, we have 2 pieces of hit gear here. We have Star of Mysteria, Banthok Sash. At the time of this filming, there's also the PvP boots now if you want to grind PvP rank that also give 1% hit. But that's basically all you can realistically get right now. We're in Phase 2. Dire Maul and Battlegrounds are out. That will change, obviously, as time goes on. More options become available. But the joke of hit is that, and I'll show you the math for this in a little bit, and I'll include a post in the comments, that it is worth approximately 20 spell power. And it is higher valued the more geared your DPS is, weirdly, because the fights get shorter. So you're obviously going to be casting less Frostbolts over the duration of the fight. So if you miss a spell, it's always going to say resisted in Classic, regardless of if you miss or it is full resisted by the resist stat. It's always going to say resisted. But either way, if you miss or it's resisted, it's going to have an outsized effect on your overall DPS if you're casting 20 Frostbolts versus 30. So the resist stat over here is governed. Mobs have some internal number. It's not super clear even now what that value is. But basically all that does is if you hit, it rolls another chance to reduce the damage to 0, 75, 50, or 25 by 25% of the damage. That's a whole different thing. But so you roll a hit and then you roll again to crit is the basic chance. So if you have a ton of crit, but you have very low hit, if you for some reason don't have elemental precision and you don't have hit gear, you actually are undermining your crit. And the other thing too is, again, as fights get shorter because your DPS gets more geared, you're not going to have time to maximize your crit. So there's a little bit of an inverse value to them relative to your overall raid level. There's also the number for crit, and we'll go ahead and just tab over this and look at it now. Desktop capture. 1% crit over long would be equal to about 1% more damage to Frostbolt. Or 1 damage. Cool, it's right here. And I'll include a link to this post if you want to see it. This is about 10 spell power. Fights. So this is really simple to do because there's no haste or anything to factor in Classic. It's basically just do you hit it or not, and then you crit it or not, and then you can fuck with resist, like partial resist, but that's not super common. The joke of it is, if you have an item here, like that's here. Mana Igniting Cord, this has 25% damage on it and 1% crit, versus Banthok Sash, which has the hit and 12 spell power. You should just reduce all of those things to spell power and do the comparison that way. Because you want a really consistent throughput as a mage. And that's the best way to do it. It's just maximize spell power at the cost of everything else. So also, I'm going to look at the link of the Prebis gear on, Wowhead. I found this guide to be overall relatively good. I know other classes have issues with their guides and with them not being updated or not being super concise, but overall I found the Mage one to be pretty decent. A good baseline to get started as raiding. And it's going to tell you pretty much everything you need to know. There's not actually a whole lot of effort you need to do to get ready to raid. A lot of these bosses are fairly easy, you're going to find along the way. harder ones, I'll just point them out. Like Cape, the stuff that rolls random stats on it. Cape or these bracers down here from BlackRock. These are the harder farms, but you can just buy a green of plus damage off the auction house for that slot. Get functionally a very similar effect. Yeah, I just think you should go over this list and do your best to attain it. It's not super duper hard. Again, the joke here is if it is more spell power after you factor in how much you should relatively value hit or crit, it's a better item. That's it. You don't need complicated sims. Pretty much it. There's a little bit in the way of enchants as well. Flip back over. Most of them are going to be like, you don't get a glove enchant as a mage. Minor amount speed increase. That's the best you do. You do get Librams now. The Dire Maul is out for +8 spell damage to both your pants and your helm. Otherwise, it's pretty much intellect or resist stuff on your cloak. Not a whole ton. That is all I have to say about gearing. It's fairly straightforward, for a mage at least. Getting the items to drop is always the hard. So I forgot to mention that consumables are also an important part of raiding. So I'm going to edit this into the middle of the video if it seems weird. That's why. I'm just going to talk about them super duper quickly. Some of the stuff you need to have as a mage, and I've got examples of it here. We have the Greater Fire Protection Potion. This is for Ragnaros. He's going to splash random fire damage on you, and it actually can kill you pretty easily. This offsets that. Gives you a lot of padding. It's also pretty good for Baron. I don't pop one preemptively on Baron, though. I only do it if I get the bomb. And that's because the bomb has a tendency to one-shot me with how squishy super PvE-focused gear is with low stam levels. The other two things, we have Greater Arcane Elixir. It's 35 spell damage. There's a Lesser Arcane Elixir. These two don't stack. You can only use one of them, so just use the 35. Elixir of Frost Power is now in the game, post Winter's Veil holiday. Spell power, frost damage for. We also have Dark Runes. This is a mini life tap. It's a build your own life tap. It shares a cooldown with the mana gem that you have as a mage as well, mana rubies, etc. So that's a little thing to be conscious of, but it's still pretty valuable and you want to have it around with you in addition to major mana potions. One of the other things you can have, I don't use these super often anymore because our priests have gotten really good at dispelling on Baron, but it's a restorative potion. Use this and it'll dispel any, mostly magic debuffs, but magic, you can decurse yourself, poison or disease, 5 seconds for 30 seconds. Mostly important to get that mana burn dot off you on Baron. And then the final one, we don't require this to raid because Molten Core is relatively easy. Hello. But it is Flask of Supreme Power, and this is 150 spell power for 2 hours. Death, like all other flasks, it actually does stack with Greater Arcane Elixir despite being that. That's the good rule of thumb, by the way, is if they both increase the same stat, you only get one of them. Like a Scroll and Arcane Intellect. That will probably end up being required for later raiding content as stuff just gets harder and harder, but for now, we don't use them. They're very expensive. I just have one laying around, so it's worth mentioning. Oh, also, we have a food buff. We have Nightfin Soup. This is going to give us 8 mana every 5 seconds for 10 minutes. The other option is the Rum Tum Tuber Surprise, which is 10 intellect, I believe. The difference being if the fight is longer than 1 minute, Nightfin Soup wins out, but if it's shorter, then the intellect food wins out. And our shortest fight in Molten Core right now is just over 1 minute. It's like 1 minute and 3 seconds or something like that. So I don't bother to pack both. I think it's a bit overkill. I just bring Nightfin for everything. I very rarely have mana problems. There's people who tell you that you should make multiple mana gems for each fight. Usually stuff's dead before I need that. I only make the ruby. The only time I change that is the AoE heavy fights and Ragnaros. Our guild's overall DPS is fairly low, so we usually get moments while I'm filming this, so get to have extra stuff to offset the longer Ragnaros fight. But yeah, I'll drop this in the relevant video. Thank you guys again for watching. Be a good vending machine. I'll show you how to be a good vending machine. This is an option that I didn't know existed. Go to social, and you click block trades. You check this box. This is how you be the best mage you can